I thought I was done with all things bacon. I was certain of it. I'd covered every possible bacon path there was, but I was wrong. Not for the first time, and not for the last. I heard some people talking, and one of them mentioned Roger Bacon, and it hit me. Here was yet another Bacon for me to investigate, and right under my proverbial nose as well. They were talking about Roger Bacon because they were talking about high school basketball. Roger Bacon is a local Catholic high school on the other side of the city where I live, which might as well be on the other side of the moon, so I don't think about it unless I overhear people talking about high school football or basketball. Roger Bacon, the man for whom the school is named, lived in the 13th century. He was a Franciscan friar, which I think is akin to being a monk. I find it astonishing that someone from another country who lived 800 years ago would have a high school named for him in the city where I live. I think there's a Franciscan connection. I think the Franciscan order established that school and named it for one of their own. Whether they still operate the school, whether they still exist, how vital is the order of Franciscan friars today, I have no idea. I do know why they would pick one of their order out and name a school for him. It's because he put his thoughts into writing, copies of which still exist today. That greater permanence has preserved him, or at least his name. He wrote because he was invited to do so by an acquaintance, also in the church, a powerful figure in the church, who was elected Pope, Pope Clement IV, and when the Pope asked you to write something out for him in the 13th century, you did it. The Pope asked the friar, Roger Bacon, who was known for his high degree of learning, which meant he was a scholar, a reader of texts, for his thoughts on a possible synthesis of philosophy and theology. Bacon had many thoughts on that subject, and he wrote what amounted to a book, which he called his Opus Maius, or Great Work. In it he considered philosophy, which is a way of looking at or interacting with or attempting to understand the world. He believed Aristotle to be a master of philosophical inquiry. Aristotle had taught that the only way you can know anything about the world is to study it, to compile facts, and make deductions from this, what is known as the empirical approach. This is opposed to the learning that believes that all true knowledge comes from tradition and authority, what is already known. This way of thinking is close to what we call scientific, making Roger Bacon something of a forerunner to Francis Bacon, who would one day, a few hundred years later, promote what became the scientific method. And there are those people who think that Roger Bacon, living in what we call the Dark Ages, was a man whose thinking was far ahead of his time. Others back away from that, noting his interest in alchemy and astrology, not exactly what we think of as scientific fields. His Pope died, and Roger Bacon put his quill down for the most part, and he may have been imprisoned for a time for thinking the way he did. Having a favored position in the Catholic Church was a competitive proposition then, making you enemies as well as friends, and you could fall as quickly and as far as you had risen. But Roger Bacon continued to study and think and teach, and after he died, he was remembered as Dr. Mirabilis, which means wonderful teacher, another reason why someone might name a high school after him 800 years after his death. That nickname puts me in mind of another honorary doctor, Dr. J, who schooled quite a few people in his own way, and brings us back to where this began, the world of basketball, high school basketball specifically, and the fate of a team named for an 800-year-old Franciscan friar. And what is left for me, a more pressing speculation, am I now finally done with bacon?